This is a short story written by Truman Capote, who was a famous, talented American author. It's called The Thanksgiving Visitor. Talk about mean. Odd Henderson was the meanest human creature in my experience. And I'm speaking of a 12-year-old boy, not some grown-up who has had the time to ripen a naturally evil disposition. At least, Odd was 12 in 1932, when we were both second graders, attending a small town school in rural Alabama. Isn't that funny? Odd was 12 and he was in the second grade. And yeah, his name is Odd, O-D-D. Tall for his age, a bony boy with muddy red hair and yellow, narrow eyes, he towered over all his classmates. Would have in any event, for the rest of us were only 7 or 8 years old. Odd had failed first grade twice and was now serving his second term in the second grade. This sorry record wasn't due to dumbness. Odd was intelligent. Maybe cunning is a better word. But he took after the rest of the Hendersons. The whole family, there were 10 of them, not counting Dad Henderson, who was a bootlegger and usually in jail, all scrunched together in a 4-room house next door to a Negro church. The whole family was a shiftless, surly bunch, every one of them ready to do you a bad turn. Odd wasn't the worst of the lot, and brother, that is saying something. Many children in our school came from families poorer than the Hendersons. Odd had a pair of shoes, while some boys, girls too, were forced to go barefoot right through the bitterest weather. That's how hard the Depression had hit Alabama. But nobody, I don't care who, looked as down and out as Odd. A skinny, freckled scarecrow in sweaty cast-off overalls that would have been a humiliation to a chain gang convict. You might have felt pity for him if he hadn't been so hateful. All the kids feared him. Not just us younger kids, but even boys his own age and older. Nobody ever picked a fight with him. Except one time, a girl named Ann Jumbo Finchburg, who happened to be the other town bully. Jumbo, a sawed-off but solid tomboy with an all-hell-let-loose wrestling technique, jumped Odd from behind during recess one dull morning, and it took 3 teachers, each of whom must have wished the combatants would kill each other. It took them a good long while to separate them. The result was sort of a draw. Jumbo lost a tooth and half her hair, and developed a grayish cloud in her left eye. She never could see clear again. Odd's afflictions included a broken thumb, plus scratch scars that will stay with him to the day they shut his coffin. For months afterward, Odd played every kind of trick to goad Jumbo into a rematch, but Jumbo had gotten her licks and gave him considerable berth. As I would have done if he'd let me. Alas, I was the object of Odd's relentless attentions. Considering the era and locale, I was fairly well off, living as I did in a high-ceilinged old country house situated where the town ended and the farms and forests began. The house belonged to distant relatives, elderly cousins, and these cousins, 3 maiden ladies and their bachelor brother, had taken me under the roof because of a disturbance among my more immediate family, a custody battle that, for involved reasons, had left me stranded in this somewhat eccentric Alabama household. Not that I was unhappy there. Indeed, moments of those first years turned out to be the happiest part of an otherwise difficult childhood, mainly because the youngest of the cousins, a woman in her 60s, became my first friend. As she was a child herself, many people thought her less than that and murmured about her as though she were the twin of poor, nice Lester Tucker, who roamed the streets in his sweet days. But she understood children, and she understood me absolutely. Perhaps it was strange for a young boy to have as his best friend an aging spinster, but neither of us had had an ordinary outlook or background, and so it was inevitable in our separate loneliness that we would come to share a friendship apart. Except for the hours I spent at school, the three of us, me and old Queenie, our feisty little rat terrier, and Miss Sook, as everyone called my friend, were always together. We hunted herbs in the woods, went fishing on remote creeks with dried sugarcane stalks for fishing poles, and gathered curious ferns and greeneries that we transplanted and grew with trailing flourish in tin pails and chamber pots. Mostly, though, our life was lived in the kitchen, a farmhouse kitchen, dominated by a big black wood-burning stove that was often dark and sunny at the same time, this kitchen. Miss Sook, sensitive as shy lady fern, a recluse who had never traveled beyond the county boundaries, was totally unlike her brother and sisters, the latter being down-to-earth, vaguely masculine ladies who operated a dry goods store and several other business ventures. The brother, Uncle B, owned a number of cotton farms scattered around the countryside. Because he refused to drive a car or endure any contact whatever with mobilized machinery, he rode horseback, jogging all day from one property to another. He was a kind man, though a silent one. He grunted yes or no, and really never opened his mouth except to feed it. At every meal he had the appetite of an Alaskan grizzly after a winter's hibernation, and it was Miss Sook's task to fill him up. Breakfast was our principal meal. Midday dinner, except on Sundays, and supper were casual menus often composed of leftovers from the morning. These breakfasts, served promptly at 5:30 a.m., were regular stomach swellers. To the present day, I retain a nostalgic hunger for those cock-crow repasts of ham and fried chicken, fried pork chops, fried catfish, fried squirrel in season, fried eggs, hominy grits with gravy, black-eyed peas, collards with collared liquor and cornbread to mush it in, biscuits, pound cake, pancakes, and molasses, honey in the comb, homemade jams and jellies, sweet milk, buttermilk, coffee, chicory-flavored and hot as Hades. The cook, accompanied by her assistants, Queenie and myself, rose every morning at 4 o'clock to fire the stove and set the table and get everything started. Rising at that hour was not the hardship it may sound. We were used to it. And anyway, we always went to bed as soon as the sun dropped and the birds had settled in the trees. Also, my friend was not as frail as she seemed, though she had been sickly as a child, and her shoulders were hunched. She had strong hands and sturdy legs. She could move with sprightly, purposeful speed, the frayed tennis shoes she invariably wore squeaking on the waxed kitchen floor, and her distinguished face, with its delicately clumsy features and beautiful youthful eyes, bespoke a fortitude that suggested it was more the reward of an interior spiritual shine than her visible surface of mere mortal health. I think that means Miss Sook was good inside, so she looked young and happy and healthy. Nevertheless, depending on the season and the number of hands employed on Uncle B's farms, there were sometimes as many as 15 people sitting down to those dawn banquets. The hands were entitled to one hot meal a day. It was part of their wages. Supposedly, a Negro woman came in to help wash the dishes, make the beds, clean the house, and do the laundry. She was lazy and unreliable, but she was a lifelong friend of Miss Sook's, which meant that my friend would not consider replacing her and simply did the work herself. She chopped firewood, tended a large menagerie of chickens, turkeys, and hogs, scrubbed, dusted, mended all our clothes. Yet when I came home from school, she was always eager to keep me company, to play a card game named Rook, or rush off on a mushroom hunt, or have a pillow fight, or, as we sat in the kitchen's waning afternoon light, help me with my homework. She loved to pore over my textbooks, the geography atlas especially. "Oh, Buddy," she would say, because she called me Buddy, "just think of it, a lake named Titicaca that really exists somewhere in the world." My education was her education as well. Due to her childhood illness, she had had almost no schooling. Her handwriting was a series of jagged eruptions, the spelling a highly personal and phonetic affair. I could already write and read with a smoother assurance than she was capable of, though she managed to study one Bible chapter every day and never missed Little Orphan Annie or the Katzenjammer Kids, comics carried by the Mobile newspaper. She took a bristling pride in our report cards. "Gosh, Buddy, 5 A's. Even arithmetic. I didn't dare to hope we'd get an A in arithmetic." It was a mystery to her why I hated school. Why some mornings I wept and pleaded with Uncle B, the deciding voice in the house, to let me stay home. Of course, it wasn't that I hated school. What I hated was Odd Henderson, the torments he contrived. For instance, he used to wait for me in the shadows under a water oak that darkened an edge of the school grounds. In his hand he held a paper sack stuffed with prickly cockleburs collected on his way to school. Cockleburs are like stickers from a plant. There was no sense in trying to outrun him, for he was quick as a coiled snake. Like a rattler, he struck, slammed me to the ground, and his slitty eyes, gleeful, rubbed the burrs into my scalp. Usually a circle of kids ganged around to titter or pretend to. They didn't really think it was funny, but Odd made them nervous and ready to please. Later, hiding in a toilet in the boys' room, I would untangle the burrs, knotting my hair. This took forever and always meant missing the first bell. Our second grade teacher, Miss Armstrong, was sympathetic, for she suspected what was happening, but eventually, exasperated by my continual tardiness, she raged at me in front of the whole class. "Little Mr. Big Britches, what a big head he has, waltzing in here 20 minutes after the bell, a half hour." Whereupon I lost control, pointed at Odd Henderson and shouted, "Yell at him! He's the one to blame, the son of a bitch!" I knew a lot of curse words, yet even I was shocked when I heard what I had said resounding in an awful silence. And Miss Armstrong, advancing toward me clutching a heavy ruler, said, "Hold out your hands, sir. Palms up, sir." Then, while Odd Henderson watched with a small citric smile, she blistered the palms of my hands with her brass-edged ruler until the room blurred. It would take a page in a small print to list the imaginative punishments Odd inflicted on me. But what I resented and suffered from most was the sense of dour expectations he induced. Once, when he had me pinned against a wall, I asked him straight out what I had done to make him dislike me so. Suddenly he relaxed, let me loose, and said, "Well, you're a sissy. I'm to straighten you out." He was right. I was a sissy of sorts, and the moment he said it, I realized there was nothing I could do to alter his judgment, other than toughen myself to accept and defend the fact. As soon as I regained the peace of the warm kitchen where Queenie might be gnawing an old dug-up bone and my friend puttering with a pie crust, the weight of Odd Henderson would blessedly slide from my shoulders. But too often at night, The narrow lion eyes loomed in my dreams, while his high, harsh voice, pronouncing cruel promises, hissed to my ears. My friend's bedroom was next to mine. Occasionally, cries arising from my nightmare upheavals wakened her, and then she would come and shake me out of my odd Henderson coma. "Look," she'd say, lighting a lamp, "you've even scared Queenie. She's shaking." And, "Is it a fever? You're wringing wet. Maybe we ought to call Dr. Stone." But she knew that it wasn't a fever. She knew that it was because of my troubles at school, for I had told and told her how odd Henderson treated me. But now I'd stopped talking about it, never mentioning it anymore, because she refused to acknowledge that any human could be as bad as I made him out. Innocence, preserved by the absence of experience that had always isolated Miss Sook, left her incapable of encompassing an evil so complete as odd Henderson. "Oh," she might say, rubbing heat into my chilled hands, "he only picks out of you out of jealousy. He's not smart and pretty as you are." Or less jestingly, "The thing to keep in mind, buddy, is this boy can't help acting ugly. He doesn't know any different. All those Henderson children have had it hard, and you can lay that at Dad Henderson's door. I don't like to say it, but that man never was anything except a mischief and a fool. Did you know Uncle B horsewhipped him once? Caught that man beating a dog and horsewhipped him on the spot. Oh, the best thing that ever happened was when they locked him up at the state farm. That's a prison. But I remember Molly Henderson before she married Dad. Just 15 or 16 she was, and fresh from somewhere across the river. She worked for Sadie Danvers down the road, learning to be a dressmaker. She used to pass here and see me hoeing in the garden. Such a polite girl, with lovely red hair, and so appreciative of everything. Sometimes I'd give her a big bunch of sweet peas or japonica, and she was always so appreciative. Then she began strolling by, arm in arm with Dad Henderson, and him so much older, and a perfect rascal, drunk or sober. Well, the Lord must have his reasons, but it's a shame. Molly can't be more than 35, and there she is without a tooth in her head or a dime to her name, nothing but a house full of children to feed. You gotta take all that into account, buddy, and be patient." Patient? What was the use of discussing it? Finally, though, my friend did comprehend the seriousness of my despair. The realization arrived in a quiet way. It was not the outcome of unhappy midnight wakings or pleading scenes with Uncle B. It happened one rainy November twilight when we were sitting alone in the kitchen close by the dying stove fire. Supper was over, the dishes stacked, and Queenie was tucked in a rocker snoring. I could hear my friend's whispery voice weaving under the skipping noise of rain on the roof. But my mind was on my worries, and I was not attending, though I was aware that her subject was Thanksgiving, then a week away. Now, my cousins had never married. Uncle B had almost married, but his fiancée returned the engagement ring when she saw that sharing a house with 3 very individual spinsters would be part of the bargain. However, my cousins boasted extensive family connections throughout the vicinity, cousins aplenty, and an aunt, Mrs. Mary Taylor Wheelwright, who was 103 years old. As our house was the largest and most conveniently located, it was traditional for these relations to aim themselves our way. Thunder. Fall thunder. They would aim themselves our way every year at Thanksgiving. Though there was seldom fewer than 30 celebrants, it was not an onerous chore because we provided only the setting and an ample number of stuffed turkeys. The guests supplied the trimmings, each of them contributing her particular specialty. A cousin twice removed, Harriet Parker from Flomaton made perfect ambrosia, transparent orange slices combined with freshly ground coconut. Harriet's sister, Alice, usually arrived carrying a dish of whipped sweet potatoes and raisins. The Conklin tribe, Mr. and Mrs. Bill Conklin and their quartet of handsome daughters, always brought a delicious array of vegetables canned during the summer. My own favorite was a cold banana pudding, a guarded recipe of the ancient aunt, who, despite her longevity, was still domestically energetic. To our sorrow, she took the secret with her when she died in 1934, age 105. And it wasn't age that lowered the curtain on her life. She was attacked and trampled by a bull in a pasture. Miss Sook was ruminating on these matters of Thanksgiving while my mind wandered through a maze as melancholy as the wet twilight. Suddenly I heard her knuckles rap the kitchen table. "Buddy!" "What?" "You haven't listened to one word." "Sorry." "I figure we'll need 5 turkeys this year. When I spoke to Uncle B about it, he said he wanted you to kill them. Dress them too." "But why?" "He says a boy ought to know how to do things like that." Now, slaughtering was Uncle B's job. It was an ordeal for me to watch him butcher a hog or even wring a chicken's neck. My friend felt the same way. Neither of us could abide any violence bloodier than swatting flies, so I was taken aback at her casual relaying of this command. "Well, I won't." Now she smiled. "Of course you won't. I'll get Bubber or some other colored boy. Pay him a nickel. But," she said, her tone descending conspiratorially, "we'll let Uncle B believe it was you. Then he'll be pleased and stop saying it's such a bad thing." "What's a bad thing?" "Oh, our always being together. He says you ought to have other friends, boys your age." "Well, he's right." "I don't want any other friend." "Hush, buddy, now hush. You've been real good to me. I don't know what I'd do without you. You just become an old crab, I guess. But I want to see you happy, buddy. Strong, able to go out in the world. And you're never going to until you come to terms with people like Odd Henderson and turn them into friends." "Him? He's the last friend in the world I want." "Please, buddy, invite that boy here for Thanksgiving dinner." Though the pair of us occasionally quibbled, we never quarreled. At first I was unable to believe she meant her request as something more than a sample of poor taste humor. But then, seeing that she was serious, I realized in bewilderment that we were edging toward a falling out. "I thought you were my friend." "I am, buddy, truly." "If you were, you couldn't think up a thing like that. Odd Henderson hates me. He's my enemy." "Oh, he can't hate you. He doesn't know you." "Well, I hate him." "Because you don't know him. That's all I ask. The chance for you to know each other a little. Then I think this trouble will stop. And maybe you're right, buddy. Maybe you boys won't ever be friends. But I doubt that he'd pick on you anymore." "Oh, you don't understand. You've never hated anybody." "No, I never have. We're allotted just so much time on earth, and I wouldn't want the Lord to see me wasting mine on any such manner." "I won't do it. He'd think I was crazy, and I would be." The rain had let up, leaving a silence that lengthened miserably. My friend's clear eyes contemplated me as though I were a rook card she was deciding how to play. She maneuvered a salt-pepper lock of hair off her forehead and sighed. "Then I will, tomorrow," she said. "I'll put on my hat and pay a call on Molly Henderson." This statement certified her determination, for I had never known Miss Sook to plan a call on anyone. Not only because she was entirely without social talent, but also because she was too modest to presume a welcome. "Oh, I don't suppose there'll be much Thanksgiving in their house. Probably Molly would be very pleased to have Odd sit down with us. Oh, I know Uncle B would never permit it, but the nice thing to do would be to invite them all. My laughter at this woke Queenie, and after a surprised instant, my friend laughed too. Her cheeks pinked and a light flared in her eyes. Rising, she hugged me and said, "Oh, buddy, I knew you'd forgive me and recognize there was some sense to my notion." She was mistaken. My merriment had other origins, too. One was the picture of Uncle B carving turkey for all those cantankerous Hendersons. The second was, it had occurred to me that I had no cause for alarm. Miss Sook might extend the invitation, and Odd's mother might accept in his behalf, but Odd wouldn't show up in a million years. He would be too proud. For instance, throughout the Depression years, our school distributed free milk and sandwiches to all children whose families were too poor to provide them with a lunchbox. But Odd, emaciated as he was, refused to have anything to do with these handouts. He'd wander off by himself and devour a pocketful of peanuts or gnaw on a large raw turnip. This kind of pride was characteristic of the Henderson breed. They might steal, gouge the gold out of a dead man's teeth, but they would never accept a gift offered openly, for anything smacking of charity was offensive to them. Odd was sure to figure Miss Sook's invitation was a charitable gesture, or see it, and not incorrectly, as a blackmailing stunt meant to make him ease up on me. I went to bed that night with a light heart, for I was certain my Thanksgiving would not be marred by the presence of such an unsuitable visitor. The next morning I had a bad cold, which was pleasant. It meant no school. It also meant I could have a fire in my room and cream of tomato soup and hours alone with Mr. Micawber and David Copperfield. The happiest of stay-a-beds. Those are novels. He was happy he got to sit home and read. It was drizzling again, but true to her promise, my friend fetched her hat, a straw cartwheel decorated with a weather-faded velvet rose, and set out for the Henderson home. "I won't be but a minute," she said. In fact, she was gone the better part of 2 hours. I couldn't imagine Miss Sook sustaining so long a conversation, except with me or herself. She talked to herself often, a habit of sane persons of a solitary nature. And when she returned, she did seem drained. Still